walk right now, and I figured I would take you along with me and I could answer some questions while I walk. So the question for today is from B-Day Ha. Ooh, there's a doggy in there. Okay, the question is from B-Day Ha, and it is, what and how do you talk to your kids about Scientology now that they're older? Are you and Dallas open with them about it? How do they take it? I thought this was a great question, and of course I always love talking about my kids. So the answer is, yes, I definitely do talk with them about it. We both do, but not in a way where we're instructing them about what Scientology is or that it's like a dangerous cult or something like that. Just because I don't think that's the right way to approach it at this time. I mean, they know that it was bad. It was not a good way to grow up. They know that it's very different from how they're growing up. But I think that the most important thing we can do right now is to model for them a good way to grow up, a good way to have relationships with their parents. What is the proper way for them to be treated so that if someday they come across a group or a person or an organization that treats them less than that, then it will seem weird to them, and they will know that they have somewhere to go back to that will take care of them and help them. I think that's the most important. It's almost like, I feel like it's more important for me. I feel like my kids are more likely to listen to what I do than what I say. I do openly refer to my time in Scientology, and I do tell them factual things about how I grew up and what it was like. But it's because, a lot of that is because, one, I don't want them to ever feel like there's any shame surrounding it. Being open and honest with maybe hard things you've been through, but also because it's a part of my story, and so it's also a part of their story. And I think having a story and knowing where you come from as a kid and knowing about your history is really important. When I was growing up, because I wasn't in a house with my parents and we didn't spend much time together, I never really knew how they met. I never knew how they got into Scientology. I didn't know much about their life before that. And so I think them knowing my story and knowing their dad's story and how we grew up, I think that it gives them just a sense of history, a sense of belonging somewhere. I think that another reason why I talk with them about Scientology, mostly just my experience, and I'll say things like, oh, I didn't go to school, or I saw my parents on these days, but I'll also tell them some of the good things, because in many ways I don't want them to be traumatized for me. So I just tell them little tidbits. But one of the reasons that I do that is because I believe that one of the reasons why I even tell them some of the hard parts is that I believe that when you're vulnerable with someone, it makes them let down their own guard. It makes them not have to act overconfident, or in some ways it makes them not feel the need to compete with you in any way, which some people do. But when you tell them about something that you went through that's like unusual or that was hard, I feel like doing that, it just opens the door to a connection. And most people, their sort of tough facade sort of falls away, and they tell you something about themselves that they don't really tell many people, and their demeanor changes and they become a more empathetic, open version of themselves, and it leads to connection. I really think that that's the key to connection. And so I think modeling that for my kids, and I see them both do that in their everyday lives, I think modeling that for my kids will just make it so they will have more friends, more people in their life who love them, and it sort of also models openness in a relationship and communicating about things. I hope that makes sense. So my kids definitely know what Scientology is. They know that their great uncle is the leader of Scientology. They know that their grandparents on both sides were in Scientology. I believe that they know who Elon Hubbard is, and I'm sure they know that Tom Cruise and John Travolta are in Scientology. I wonder if they know what a Thetan is. I don't think so. But so when my son, I would say when he was about 11, he wanted to read my book. And I was a little concerned about it because there's some heavy topics in there. But I also wanted, if he wanted to do that, then it was okay with me, just as long as he asked me any questions. And so I don't know how thoroughly he read it as an 11-year-old, but he did ask me some questions, and we talked about a few tough subjects. I mean, the main thing I wanted him to know that I was okay now, and now that I had them, life was good, and that's over, and I'm not in that bad situation anymore. And I'm sure he doesn't remember half of it, but he is aware of some of it. He knows that Scientology is bad. He knows many people who also grew up in Scientology. They're like uncles to him, and so sometimes when we're around them, we get to talking about it, and it's probably all just boring for him, and for my daughter especially. She's like, "Can we go now?" But yeah, it's definitely something they're aware of. I think as they get older, staying away from cults and bad relationships and that sort of thing is something that we can talk about more in depth. But for now, I think just treating them well, teaching them how the right way to be treated in a relationship, and making them know their value as people, I think that is a more effective way of keeping them away from cult-like organizations, including Scientology. One of the reasons why I don't teach them about Scientology directly quite yet is because I remember when growing up in Scientology, Elon Hubbard would have certain concepts that we were supposed to learn, but they were really made for adults. Like, they were made for like a life repair situation, and they were being applied. They were supposed to be applied to problems you had in your life. But as a little kid, I didn't have any of those problems yet. And so I had no value for them. So, something that maybe could have been useful to an adult or somebody who had a job or somebody who was in a marriage, being taught as your first line of learning in a subject, such as communication, it winds up teaching you to be robotic instead of teaching you to improve your communication that you already have. And so I guess the reason why I'm making that analogy is because I don't want to dive in being like, no, don't jump into a cult, don't here are some warning signs, all that sort of thing. I think that the level below that is are my kids being treated well? Are them learning what a healthy relationship is? It's them building their own self-confidence. It's them getting an education. It's them having good role models in their life. And I think having that baseline be there is the most important aspect to making sure that my kids never join a group like Scientology. Now, I know many people still have all of those great things in their life. They had self-confidence, they had great parents, a great upbringing, and they still joined Scientology. So, of course, that's not the only line of defense, but it definitely does lower your chances of becoming involved in Scientology. Sometimes my daughter says silly things like, "Oh, it sounds like it was great at the ranch. You didn't even have to go to school." She's joking, but kind of not, like when she doesn't want to go to school. But then I tell her, I'm like, well, yeah, but we had to work in the garden all day because during COVID, when I was supposed to be homeschooling them, I was like, okay, I'm gonna have this whole program, and we work in the garden for like an hour, and both of my kids basically like completely revolted and never did it, and I gave up as well, and I couldn't wait for them to go back to school because they didn't do anything I said. So it's just funny when I said, oh yeah, but we had to work in the garden all day. She was like, oh, never mind. It's horrible. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. If you have any other questions, questions about Scientology, even just its basic principles, questions about what it was like to grow up in Scientology, questions about my story, please leave them in the comments. I do see all of them, and I really want to get to all of them, and I've been really enjoying doing this little segment where I answer people's questions. Don't forget to check out Sins of Scientology on YouTube. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. See you again tomorrow. Bye.